What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video. I am sitting on my balcony. I am enjoying the weather. I am working from home today, and I figured I'd hop on the camera and share a little bit about my thoughts that I'm having around this time. For those of you who are new here, I am Danica. I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and I am a forensic psychologist in training. I am finishing up my postdoctoral fellowship, where I am focusing on forensic mental health evaluations to be certified as a designated forensic psychologist, or a DFP. And if I haven't introduced her in a while, this is baby girl Remy. She has a honorary doctorate in clinical psychology as well as forensic psychology. She is my little mini-me, my other half, and is in all, if not most of my videos. So this is a really meaningful time of the year for me, mainly because I graduated exactly 1 year ago. So I graduated May 3rd or 2nd of 2024. I have just been reflecting a lot about grad school and life since graduate school, and I've had several conversations with close friends, some of you all who are interested in getting a PhD or doctorate and have been accepted to programs, and so this video has really been inspired by you all, and I just wanted to talk a little bit more frankly about my time in graduate school. I think one, it is empowering for me to be able now to tell my story and being on the other side of it. Not to say that it was easy by any means or any stretch of the imagination, but there's a strong sense of pride in being able to share the beginning, middle, and end of that story and sort of the epilogue. I think I'd be doing myself and you all a disservice by not acknowledging the hardships of graduate school. I don't think I was fully prepared for the challenges that I would experience in grad school, some of it because it has been unique to me and my experience, and because I think people aren't always having these conversations. I think it's becoming more common. And one of the reasons why I have this YouTube channel and this podcast is to be able to share transparently my experience and sort of normalize mistakes that I've made, how I've been able to cope or try to cope with some of those challenges. So let's just dive right into it. So I started graduate school in 2018. I graduated in 2024, so I did a total of 6 years. And sort of just zooming out from a more broad perspective, the first 2 years were course heavy. It's intended to be that way because you get your master's after the second year, after you finish the coursework, after you take your qualifying exams, and then after you propose and defend your master's thesis. So I did that. It was very challenging, but nonetheless a huge accomplishment to be able to have that tangible achievement and that degree. And then from years 3 to 6, I focused on graduating. So focused on getting competitive clinical experience for internship. I focused on advancing my research projects. I focused on preparing to propose my dissertation, as well as wrapping that up. And in that final year, it's a pre-doctoral internship. So exactly as it sounds, before you get your doctorate, you do a 1 year long clinical placement, which is very similar to the match and residency process in medical school. The difference is that our residency occurs before we graduate versus in a traditional medical program, it occurs after, hence residency. So I knew all along that I wanted to be in forensics even before I applied for my PhD. I was really interested in focusing on not just the forensic population, so with inmate population or people who are incarcerated, but really focusing on some of the problems that you might see within that population, be it substance use, be it victims of abuse themselves, whether that is victims of domestic violence, physical violence, sexual violence, victims of poverty, victims of systemic oppression, things of the like. So knowing that, I focused on research and clinical placements that would allow me to speak to those issues and be able to equip me with the skills necessary so that when I am in a penal setting or working in a forensic context, I have this similar or adjacent experience that will allow me to apply those skills and adapt to that setting. So let's just fast forward to where things really got difficult and I sort of fell off the face of the earth a little bit, in the sense of that's when I stopped posting. I just was feeling very lost. So my fourth year of grad school, that is when you apply for your APPIC or APA accredited internship, and I will provide definitions to the acronyms that I'm using in the description box below. So this is 2021, so we are right on the heels of the pandemic and sort of figuring out what this new normal looked like, and I was applying for internship, and that was October 2021 was like that internal deadline where you had to make sure that you had successfully defended your dissertation in order to submit your applications for that November 1st deadline. I was working towards preparing my dissertation proposal. A part of most programs have this internal deadline, which is for the students' benefit to be able to propose their dissertation before applying to internship, because it's virtually impossible to be able to go on internship without proposing your dissertation and then successfully defend it within a year. That's just, it's not realistic, and you just don't want that kind of pressure on your internship year. So I was spending the summer writing up my proposal. So there are two components when you think about these large research milestones for your master's thesis as well as for your dissertation. There's the written product, so the manuscript that you are developing, and then there is the presentation. So the presentation is what you are presenting to your committee, and then that will include or follow a 1 to 1.5 hour discussion, if I'm remembering correctly, and that includes question and answer, figuring out ways to improve your study, getting feedback from your committee so that they could see those changes by the time you defend at the end of your program. Well, before I get into the struggles of my dissertation journey, I want to be very clear in that I hold no ill will or animosity towards anybody that was involved in my dissertation process. I think in the moment, of course, there was frustration, there was pain, there was anger, there was just confusion all around that impacted the quality of my relationships, and I have been able to work through that and sort of hold both this idea of that was a very challenging time, and I may not agree with some of the choices that were made and how things played out, and I think I'm able to move forward and still maintain a relationship with all of those involved in my dissertation process. So I just want to be very clear, and I'm not saying that you have to sort of come out on the other side being like, everything's fine, I'm going to be friends with everyone. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is everybody's response to conflict is different, and I think it's just a case-by-case situation, and I know myself, I don't do well harboring any hard feelings, and when I do, I think it's apparent that I'm still struggling with that, and I sit before you very honestly and transparently saying that I am okay, I'm happy. So with all that said, why don't we just proceed with the story? So for my dissertation, I did up the literature review focusing on campus climate, surveys, and ways to assess sexual violence rates on campus in an outcome in your favor, while also acknowledging that like there are some improvements that can happen, but they're not so major that it would require you to. I remember sort of winging it a little bit. I remember taking things into my own hands and producing what I thought was necessary in order to have a successful proposal. I remember there being a disconnect between my timeline and my research advisor's timeline, and that resulted in not having as much oversight and edits on my draft in order to ensure that it was at a stage where it was ready for proposal and to have a successful outcome. And my research advisors very honestly said they know that I am looking to go to internship, and that they know that I'm looking to move back to Massachusetts, and they don't want to be the one that prevents that. And so they are essentially willing to work with me despite not thinking that I was ready or prepared to propose. So I took my chances, and I'm hesitant because I wanted to say unsurprisingly, but I was surprised too. I think there was a part of me that was nervous, and I think anytime it's a pass or fail outcome, you sort of hold on to this idea that like there is a possibility that this won't work in my favor, or that I will not pass. And then there are other times you hold on to hope that you're putting your best foot forward, and that will be recognized and noticed, and you will be able to come out on the other side with an outcome in your favor, while also acknowledging that like there are some improvements that can happen, but they're not so major that it would require you to repropose your dissertation. So I can't remember the exact dates, but it was like a week or 2 weeks before that internal deadline. I stood before my committee. I did not pass. I remember going in there and hoping for the best, and hoping to talk through the revisions and feedback that my committee members had for me, and hoping that whatever feedback or concerns that they had weren't so great that again it would require me to repropose, which would require me to take a year off from applying for internship and focus on my research. So all in all, that ended up happening, and I was unable to apply to internship for November 1st of 2022, which was by far the most devastating experience that I had in grad school thus far. I felt like my whole world was shattered. I felt like I was a failure. I felt like I wasn't deserving of being in that position, and it was very embarrassing. I remember not staying too long into that embarrassment of like, this is my fault. I remember having plenty of conversations with my committee members of where things might have gone wrong and where wires, crossed and things of the like, and they were very committed to rectifying these issues, which I am forever grateful for. With the support of my family, my friends, my committee members, my faith, I was able to sort of problem solve and still hang on to the feelings that I was having, but also figuring out, okay, what do I need to do in order to move forward and still reach my ultimate goal of graduating and moving back to Massachusetts. To make matters worse, I also had a conversation with my advisors, and there was conversation about suspected plagiarism. And this came as a shock to me, a huge shock. I went through an academic hearing. It's very hard to talk about because I think I'm holding on to a lot of shame about that. And the long story short of that is that nothing came from that. It was an issue of not properly rewording despite having citations. It was clear that it wasn't intentional. It was clear that it wasn't egregious. I was balancing those two things. that made it very difficult. And big shout out to my friends who were aware of the whole story and the extent of that and the toll it took on me and the preparation that I had from conversations with them and my sounding board from professors at other programs. Just thank you. I am forever grateful for the strength that you gave me at a time where I just did not have it in me to proceed, for being my soft landing. I don't thank you enough, I think, and I don't think I ever will be able to, but please know that the support that you've provided for me is not lost on me, and it's something that I quite frankly think about on a regular basis. I was able to come back from that, and as I sort of summarize the story, it makes it seem like this was a quick and done process. It seems like there was still like this light at the end of the tunnel, but in the moment it did not feel like that. I sort of felt like I was skating on thin ice and not sure what was going to happen. I had even contemplated switching programs. I contemplated moving back to Florida because it was COVID and I was working remotely, and there were a lot of reasons why I was thinking that, and there were a lot of reasons why that wouldn't have been a wise decision. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was I ended up spending my 4th and 5th year just focusing mainly on clinical work, so doubling up to be competitive for internship. I spent that time really focused on how I can focus on things I control and take matters into my own hands. So that was ensuring that I had a competitive curriculum vitae for internship, whether that was consulting with people who were doing similar research projects as I was, or who were using similar research methodologies. So I did a qualitative research design, and I think one of the issues there was the lack of mentorship surrounding what it looks like to do robust qualitative research. And I am grateful that I bought a lot of books, I did a lot of reading, I consulted with a lot of people, and at the same time, I think my research advisors and I were learning and growing simultaneously, which was really nice to see, and that did give me a lot of confidence. So by the time I did repropose, so that brings us to, when was it? April 2023 maybe, or 22, I can't even remember. I remember it being very early on and feeling like I had no stress or pressure weighing over me in terms of this internal deadline. And I felt like I passed with flying colors because I knew my stuff. I went in there and I was not there to play. I had a lot of conversations with my committee members beforehand, and so there were a lot of things that didn't come as a surprise and that I was well prepared for, which that's not the norm, and I'm so grateful for that. So after I passed, I spent time now focusing on internship, and in 2022, so I passed my dissertation proposal the second time, April 6th, I don't know why I remember that day, 2022, applied for internship November 1st, 2022, went on internship and successfully matched with my top site in 2023, and then finished and graduated in 2024. So that's like the timeline of events. I recognize I'm sort of glossing over a lot of major points here. I think some of it is, I feel a little bit removed from the thick of that, and some of that could be just avoidance and me not wanting to open that can of worms or rehash some of that, and some of it is just out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, and that's usually how I cope. And I just felt really inclined to share this with you all because I think no one is talking about this stuff, and it is happening. And what happens when these things happen silently is that they continue, and then people continue to internalize this and say, you know, no one's going through this. This is just a me thing. And so I hope to be living proof, a testimony of what God can do in your life when you have faith, and what you can do through Him and through your community. So I want to tell you it's possible. I am a respectable doctor. I think I could say very proudly and confidently. I am transparent about what I went through. I think that is just who I am as a person, and I wanted to share this all with you very publicly, and I just hope to continue to grow this channel while not just highlighting my successes, but also highlighting the road that it took to get there. So I love you all so much. Thanks for riding this wave with me, and let's talk more about this. I'll see you all in the next one.